Well, welcome and thank you for watching. This is the London system versus Jimmy 600, game 2. Once again, we are using the chess.com bots in order to improve our practice, improve our games, and in this case, for me, it was learning the London system, and that's what we are emphasizing in this. In today's game, as I had played this maybe about 10 months ago, I've been reviewing it, and let me just say this. I lost count of all the mistakes that I made in this game, all the missed moves, all the missed opportunities that I had. And it is truly humiliating to look back at my play here some 10 months ago, but it's a good learning lesson for me. Hopefully you can glean something from it as well. So without further ado, let's get started on the game. The London system opens with d4. Once again, I will emphasize one of the weaknesses of this move is you have opportunity. Well, our opponent has opportunity in order to move the bishop and the queen on these diagonals, putting pressure on our king. We'll see if we have to deal with that through the game. But the opening move for the London is d4. Jimmy responds by moving the king's pawn. We move out the bishop to f4. Once again, if you'll look right below here, this is the final setup that we're aiming for in the London, and that can kind of be your guide in understanding the moves that I'm making and to what end they hopefully will achieve in the structure of the opening of the London. Bishop to f4. Jimmy responds by bringing his queen out very early, targeting both the bishop and the pawn here. An easy defense to this is really the next move within the London, that is e3. So now both of these are defended. And here is this move that I said the d4 pawn move can bring this weakness and opportunity. Sure enough, Jimmy brings out the dark square bishop in order to place me in check. Now at this point within the structure of the London, I have two choices. It's either moving the knight to d2 or moving the pawn up to c3. Now, it has been my experience that when I move the knight here, there can be a tendency for these bots to go ahead and move in, take the knight, make the exchange with the queen, and I don't really like that. I really want to get to my structure, understand the structure, work with it for a while before I'm ready to kind of venture into those realms. So I took the easy route, and that was just to move c3, put pressure on the bishop. So now the bishop really needs to move or be captured. Jimmy responds by moving the queen over to the g file, probably maybe in anticipation, I should say, of targeting this pawn. Should I move the light square bishop or maybe somewhere along this diagonal? Once again, whenever your opponent moves, you want to kind of look at the scope of influence that they might have by moving that piece. Right now, I'm not too concerned about that, especially since everything on the front line is defended and Jimmy has left open the capture of this bishop. I'm going to take it. And what that does now, I think you will see, is open up the C file. If you watched game 1, you saw how important that C file was toward the end of the game in bringing about checkmate. So hopefully we can take advantage of that once again. Jimmy moves his king over to the D file. I'm going to go ahead and continue on with my development, moving the knight to f3. Jimmy responds by moving the f pawn up one space to f6. And again, not sure what he's trying to accomplish unless it's going to try and bring this pawn in and make some kind of fork here, but we'll deal with that when it occurs. I'm going to go ahead and move my B knight to D2. Again, part of the development of the London, but the main emphasis really is to get either the rook or the queen along the C file. So Jimmy responds by moving his knight to E7. Having looked at this, I'm going to take advantage, move the rook in, target this file, and try and control it. Jimmy moves his c-pawn up. Now, in taking this pawn, or at least considering it, we have two options here. And as I understand, the rule of thumb is usually to take toward the center. So that is what I did, take toward the center. Now I understand that I've kind of gummed up the C file, but possibly I can move this on in and be effective in some way. Jimmy moves his knight over. Remember, when Jimmy moved his king to the D file, he gave up the opportunity to castle. So now the king is probably going to be confined somewhere in the middle of the board, and I need to begin to adjust my thinking on strategic lines of attack toward the king being there, not having been castled over here to this square. And we'll deal with that as we go through. I'm going to move my knight to the C file. Again, I'm eyeing this square right here being protected by the pawn, and that would be a great setup if I could get there and control a lot of different squares. Jimmy makes the move inward with his queen, but the issue with this right now, as I see it, is there's no backup for the queen. There's no additional piece helping the queen, supporting the queen. So the queen's kind of going at it alone right now. So I can look at this with not too much worry. Certainly I don't want to create any open lanes for the queen to take advantage of, but at the same time, I'm not going to become overly concerned with this. Now, I want you to take a moment, because this is one of the missed moves that I could have made, and it is a fork that I could have implemented through the move of one piece. If you want to pause the video, see if you can find that move that I missed at the time. Okay, well, this is it right here. Take this knight, move to this square, and you create a fork on both the queen and the rook. I missed that at the time, and that would have been a great fork, similar to, in a sense, kind of the pin that we had in the last game on the queen, and certainly would have captured either one of these, and it would have been a good trophy to have. But nonetheless, I missed it, kind of got consumed with the queen, even though I just went through that diatribe of don't be too concerned, but I did. A little overly cautious, brought the bishop up, put some pressure on the queen moves up to the D file, and I can move my pawn up to again put pressure on the queen. And what is happening in all of this, as I keep putting pressure on the queen, is I'm developing my pieces, and Jimmy keeps having to move the queen, which is preventing him from making any kind of development. So you can see these pieces here, really nothing has happened to them. They're not developed, they're not in play, they're not ready really to be deployed in any way. So this is a great advantage for me at this point. He's going to move his queen again to the H file. And let's, again, give thought to what are the possibilities now that the queen is there. Is there anything I need to be concerned about at this point? And the answer is no. So I can now kind of look at the board and figure out what would be my next move. And this is it. I'm going to go up the middle with the queen in the, or I should say with the king in the center. I want to begin to break down this pawn structure that's protecting the king, and I have ample backup for this, so I can kind of venture in and begin to attack the middle of the board. This knight coming out puts pressure on this pawn. I want to protect that, so I just simply move my bishop back along this diagonal to provide some support. It also allows my bishop to come to a place of protection, whereas before it was just out here without any pawn protection. Now I can bring it in and have this pawn protecting it, and then we'll see how Jimmy responds to this. is going to take the pawn. Of course, this is a good opportunity for me to make an exchange, to venture further into the center and into Jimmy's territory. And Jimmy responds not by taking, which I thought would have been a good move, because having done that would put pressure on my knight, but then also open up this file for a possibility of attack. But he chose not to do that. So I'm going to move in my knight. Remember, this was the original square I wanted to get to, so I could put pressure on both the rook and the bishop. And Jimmy moves up with the rook to get out of the line of fire. And at this point, I made a move during the game that now, as I look back at it, I probably would not. Probably what I should have done is just left the knight there on that square. Look at the influence that this knight has here. It's a great position. And it would have, I think, been in my best interest to just leave the knight there and exert that pressure, and then begin to move my other supporting pieces around that in some way. Instead, I kind of took the cheap route out, I call it, by just making an exchange. Again, I don't think maybe that was the best move at the time, but this is a move, and this is what we're playing with. The rook here put some pressure on this, as well as the knight. I do have some backup, but I do maybe need to be concerned about what to do with that pawn. Knowing that it will probably be sacrificed in some way, I'm just going to move it forward, see what kind of damage I can make, even though I have some support from this pawn as well. And this was part of the mistake. Having moved, let me go back. Having moved this pawn forward, this one has been left naked, which it was unprotected. Might have been better in retrospect to move this pawn up, putting pressure here and here. Once again, that can actually turn into a great mating structure right there, when you have a pawn opposite of the king, preventing the king from moving along the diagonals. But again, this is the process of learning, and we're learning together in this. He takes. I go ahead and put pressure on the rook. Two choices here: take this way, take this way. And I thought this might be the better take. One of the reasons for that is I now open up this file, and I have an opportunity in which to get to the back rank with my pawn. Jimmy elects to make an exchange here. I now have a wonderful setup with the pawn here and the queen being able to come to this square, be on the back rank, put pressure on the king, and now I've really infiltrated Black's territory here and can take advantage of that. Jimmy moves up, probably to come up and then to move over to thwart this in some way, but I'm going to move before he does. Check. Jimmy has to move out of the way. Now, at this point, once again, I made a mistake. This was the move. I went ahead and moved the pawn to the back rank in order to get the queen. But I also know that it's in line of attack, and this would end up being the exchange. And probably in retrospect, as I looked at this, there's one move I should make before I do that. See if you can find it by pausing the video. Okay, hopefully you see what I see, and that is this bishop taking this knight would have been a great step first. Maybe the rook comes over and takes, and then I can move in and truly get two queens if I wanted to. But nonetheless, a learning experience once again of a missed move, a missed opportunity, and so we get the exchange. I'm still in a great position. Now let's look at not only a possibility of lines of attack right now, but how we can kind of begin to corral the king with what we have. First of all, we have completely outnumbered Black. Black has a queen and one rook. I have obviously the queen, the rook, and then 3 additional minor pieces by which to attack with. So I have an overwhelming force here, but I still need to take advantage of this and play well. This is not an automatic win. Believe me, there were times early on in my playing when I would have a positional or a piece advantage, and I ended up losing because I was sloppy in my play. So let's look at our possibility of lines of attack. First of all, we have the dark squared bishop that can come down, put check. We have the knight that can move here and then begin to control some of these squares around the king, putting pressure on the queen, or on the king, I should say. And then certainly we have this bishop here that can come in support as well. So Jimmy makes a move of that probably isn't the wisest thing, but that's what he did. I'm going to go ahead and castle with the queen this close and me starting to move these pieces out of the way and out of protection of the king. I don't want to get the king to safety, so I'm going to go ahead and castle. The queen moves to maybe a more advantaged place there, and now I can begin to smother the king with the additional pieces that I have. Bishop to c5, check on the king. King has to move up. I can easily just move the bishop back, check once again. King moves back, and now things are beginning to open up a little bit more. There is a move that would be advantageous here, and I may have missed a fork before, but I didn't miss this one. A fork on the king and the queen. I know it's going to be short-lived, and that's okay. I can make an exchange of a knight for a rook, and certainly that's what occurred here. Move my bishop in. Easy to begin to bring support for my bishop, and also to take advantage of the e-file and control of it. We'll see how that plays out. Queen moves over. Here's perfect opportunity for a type of see-through pin, and all I have to do is, as we saw in the pin of game 1 against Jimmy 600, all I have to do is now move my bishop in one direction that would be safe, and I automatically have that pin. However, there is a problem with this, and that is if I am to move, we'll say, the bishop here, the queen can come down and it's checkmate. Well, check anyway. I'd be able to move my light square bishop back for protection, but maybe I need to consider moving my king over in order to provide support. Jimmy moves a pawn up, and that's exactly what I do. Making sure that now I can move this bishop out of the way in some direction, and we'll have this queen's check, so to speak. Jimmy moves up once again with the A pawn. No threat there. Here we go. We're going to move it back. I now have this influence over the queen, and Jimmy has to make a decision, and lo and behold, kind of similar to the last game, he made this decision to move another piece and leave his queen there. Of course, this is an easy decision to take the queen. And Jimmy comes by exchanging with the pawn. Now, obviously, this is left open, this rank, and I have pressure this way as well. Let me redraw that. I have pressure coming across this way on the dark square diagonal, so we can now begin to truly move in and surround the king. It's going to move toward the sideboards once again. My concern would be I want to keep the queen here and maybe prevent any back moves of the king, but I also have this diagonal with the support of the bishop to maybe come in and begin to attack this way. So I move over with the support of the bishop here. Check once again. King's going to have to move toward the sideboards, as I say. And now we just have to find the most effective way by which to close in on the king. And of course, this is one of those times when I didn't make all the best decisions, but let's see what we can learn from it. First move, simply move the light squared bishop, check. King has to find either a way to block or a place to move. chooses to block with the pawn. Now, at this point, a simple solution to this might be to just go ahead and move my knight or my bishop here, giving support along this diagonal, get the queen in some position to be able to execute checkmate, which I did. Jimmy chooses to block, and now at this point, probably the best move would have been to come forward, take this, again, providing this see-through support for the queen to be able to come here or here in order to checkmate. But I kind of made an interim move, not exactly sure why I did this. Obviously, it made sense to me then, doesn't make sense to me now. Jimmy moves up in support, and of course that's one of the drawbacks to making this interim move is I gave Jimmy an opportunity to provide support for this, whereas now I'm not going to be able to take it without great sacrifice on my part. So we'll take this way, check, king moves up, and now I have a diagonal here to put Jimmy in check once again and see where he can move, and that's it. 39 move, checkmate. King is trapped on both sides, pawn is supported, and he is in check. So once again, we have, even through my mistakes, my missed moves, my missed opportunities, we have a game from which we can learn and grow in understanding of the London system. Now we're going to move on to the next spot. Hope you'll join me in the next video, and thanks for watching.